everyone. In keeping with the tradition of our university, we'll begin today's program with the recitation of Holy Quran. I request Mr. Muhammad Saeed Akhtar, Research Scholar, Department of Urdu, to recite a few verses from the Holy Quran. Mr. Saeed Akhtar.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق المبارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. صدق الله العظيم. Translate English. I seek refuge in Allah Almighty from the accursed Satan. I start with the name of Allah Almighty, the most merciful, the most compassionate. There is no God. He is the knower of all things open and hidden. He is the most merciful, the most compassionate. He is Allah, besides whom there is no deity. He is the King, the glorious, the giver of peace, the guardian of all, the exalted in might, the glorious. He is Allah, the creator, the maker. He has good name. He has good names. All things in the heaven and the earth glorify him. And he is the might, the wise. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan. In the last 2 years, the world has passed through the phase of immense suffering and trauma due to the corona pandemic. But it is during these 2 years that teachers and academicians have explored new ways of reaching out to the students, and online teaching and learning has been a great boon during this tumultuous time. I take this opportunity to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Ainul Hassan, for encouraging and facilitating this online extension series. In the past few months, various departments of Maulana Azad National Urdu University Lucknow campus have been organizing extension lectures. Today's lecture by Professor Muhammad Asim Siddiqui is the second in the series of extension lectures organized by the Department of English, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Lucknow campus. The encounter in the subcontinent paved the way for the growth of English as a medium of creative expression. South Asian literature traces the experiences, joys, and pains of the people of Indian subcontinent and reflects their ethos and culture. Today we have with us noted scholar, critic, translator, and academician Professor Muhammad Asim Siddiqui, who will be speaking on the topic Doing South Asian Literature, Definition, Scope, and Challenges. Professor Asim Siddiqui is the chairman, Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. His areas of interest include 19th century American fiction, literary theory, South Asian literature, cultural studies, film studies, research methodology, and academic writing. He was a Fulbright Fellow at New York University in 2007. Professor Siddiqui has been on the editorial board of many literary and cultural journals. He has widely published in reputed national and international journals like The Guardian, Asiatic, Social Scientist, Third Frame, Literature, Culture and Society, Cambridge University Press, Journal of English Language and Literature, Journal of Children's Literature, Remarkings, Women and Society, and the Aligarh Journal of English Studies. He is the editor of special issue of Journal of the Faculty of Arts, AMU, on Shamsur Rahman Faruqi, which has just been released. Professor Asim Siddiqui writes regular columns on arts and culture in The Hindu, ndtv.com, Scroll, and rediff.com. His articles have also appeared in Hindustan Times, The Statesman, The Indian Express, and The Pioneer. He was the managing editor of the project of the Urdu translation of complete works of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a project of Dr. Ambedkar Foundation, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. He is in the academic committee of Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla. He has edited several books and translates extensively from Urdu and Hindi into English. He has recently published a monograph on the Urdu poet Shahryar, published by Sahitya Akademi in the year 2021. It's a privilege and honor to have Professor Asim Siddiqui with us and to listen to him. I thank you, sir, for accepting our invite, and I welcome you on behalf of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Lucknow campus. Over to you, sir, Professor Asim Siddiqui.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huma Yaqub. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it is good to see so many of your students and also so many of our colleagues. I have met some of them, and in fact, I have interacted with them. So it is equally a privilege. It is equally a privilege for me also to interact with you. Coming back to this particular topic, in the next 1 hour, I plan to speak for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then in the next 10-15 minutes, there might be scopes or some questions or some observations by the participants. So this was something that we discussed over phone, and I don't see if there is any need for any departure from this particular scheme. So without wasting any minute, I must address the topic. Today's topic, as you see that we have mentioned one key word there, and that is doing South Asian literature. South Asian literature, you know that it is a very important area, and it is also, you can say, an emerging area. Emerging in the sense that it has been there, but now there is a renewed interest in this area. Of course, there are many reasons also for a kind of renewed interest in this subject. I'll spell out those reasons a bit later. Let us first discuss this term South Asia. We know that South Asia is a term which is used very often, but it is not a term which has been in use for a long time. Roughly speaking, one can say that the term actually started being used after Second World War. And this particular term, South Asia, gained some currency in 1970s and after that in 1980s. That is why the word South Asia, or these two words here, South Asia, they have not become part of our vocabulary as such. There are reasons for that. You see that after the Second World War, the map of the world changed. Many countries became independent. And of course, the political situation in different places also changed. So there was probably a need to coin new terms and also to think about some entities in political and cultural terms and also try to define those entities. So here you can see that scholars, artists, writers, and filmmakers, many of those people who are into creative field, they have been talking about a kind of a kind of entity which you can call kind of South Asian presence in terms of art, in terms of cinema, in terms of culture. But on the other hand, there is also the demand of the nation state. That means India as a nation state, Pakistan as a nation state, or Bangladesh as a nation state. So that means here we see two very conflicting kind of demands. On the one hand, there is this emphasis on seeking some kind of cultural unity or unity which is achieved through cultural and literary forms. And on the other hand, there is this idea of isolation, where one tries to define an entity in opposition to other entities. So, for example, Bangladesh is Bangladesh because it is not Pakistan. India is India because India is not Pakistan. Or Pakistan is Pakistan because it is not India. So that means you can see these two things, these two processes simultaneously. On the one hand, we watch many television serials, we watch many films also, we read many books also. You can read a book by a Pakistani writer, and that book may be set in New Delhi. Similarly, you can read works by Indian writers, and you can see writers talking about Afghanistan, talking about Sri Lanka. In other words, literature or cinema, or for that matter, many other cultural forms, they do not accept many of those boundaries because they seek a kind of cultural unity, or if not unity, then some kind of commonalities which can be seen through different cultural forms. But the relations between different states, whether it is India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, they have their own problems. You can say that those relations are a bit fraught. So, nation state has its demands, and then on the creative front, something different may be happening. So the but coming back to this term South Asia, when it is used in the expression South Asian literature, maybe we are talking about some of those ideas, some of those commonalities also, some of those patterns also, some of those literary forms. But when we are talking about South Asia as such, then South Asia is more of a territorial entity. Now, if we go into the history of this particular term, as I just mentioned, after the Second World War, this term would be used. And there was also one particular kind of research that became important, especially in American universities after the Second World War. And this research or this particular kind of focus gave birth to what is now called area studies. That means in United States, there were many area studies programs. By area studies is meant selection of a geographical area and study of its people, its culture, its languages, and so on. In other words, we can talk about different areas. We can talk about West Asia as an area, we can talk about South Asia also as an area, and we can talk about Latin America as an area. And consequently, you see that in different area studies programs, there was focus on different places, their socio-political realities, their languages, their culture, and so on. Now there was also a bit of uneasiness about these programs because they were also considered part of American state. They were also considered part of American policies in the world. In other words, they were also considered part of American expansionist agenda. So if scholars were working in these areas, they also felt a bit uneasy. But then there was this question also that once a particular subject or a particular area develops its own forms, then it can seek its independence also from the original impulse that gave birth to it in the first place. So you can say that basically the birth of area studies program was in the United States of America, and later from that time, from United States of America, this in fact these programs developed in other places also. If I just talk about my university, we have Department of West Asian Studies. First, we had Center of West Asian Studies. If you think about Jamia Millia Islamia, there also you have many such centers. So, for example, you can have Center for Brazilian Studies, Center for Latin American Studies. So, basically, the impulse behind all these centers or all these study programs was or had its basis in American area studies programs. So, coming back to South Asia again, we can think about South Asia today in terms of an older definition or older view of India. Older view of India. Now, when I say older view of India, I am talking about many of those old names of India which were invoked in terms of culture, in terms of languages, maybe, in other words, in terms of a civilization, Indic civilization. This is the term which is used by A.L. Basham, historian A.L. Basham. And something of the kind has also been stressed by Ashish Nandi when he talked about his idea of uh, South Asia. So, when we think about some older terms for India, you know that there are many older terms. One such term is Hindustan. There is another term Al Hind or the term Bharatvarsh. And if we go back in ancient times, then a term like Jambu Deep. These are all terms. But at that time, you did not have the idea of nation state. Rather, you had the idea of a particular kind of civilization. And that's why today, if you are studying ancient roots of India, if you are studying, say, for example, Buddhism, or even if you are studying, if you are making a study of Mahabharata, then somehow Afghanistan would be central to many of the things that you will study. So, here, if we go back to the older idea of India, where words like Hindustan, Al Hind, and still still older term Jambu Deep, when these words were used, naturally these words refer to a kind of civilizational entity. But after 1947, after 1947, things change, in fact. And how things change? Because many countries became independent. And so, if today we talk about South Asia, it refers to Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. In other words, what you call SAR countries. Now, here there is one question about using a term like Hindustan, or a term like Hind, or even a term like, uh, say, for example, the word Hind or Hindustan. Why? Because these terms suggest the dominance of India. In fact, even India was one such term earlier. But if we talk about this term today, then the term Hindustan or the term India or the term Indian Ocean, or many of these terms, they in fact suggest a kind of dominance of one country, which is an important country in the region, and that is India. So naturally, the dominance of India is resented by Afghanistan or Bangladesh, whereas terms like Hindustan or terms like India, they are full of ideological moorings. That means these terms have an ideology behind them. On the other hand, the word South Asia or the term South Asia is considered free from that kind of ideological baggage, and hence the term is accepted by most. But the thing is that the word South Asia as such looks emotionally barren. In other words, when we think about South Asia, we hardly think about culture. But when we think about a term like India or Hindustan or Hind, we think about a culture which extends from one place to another place in a vast geographical region. But the word South Asia that way appears barren of culture. So at the moment, you can say that the word South Asia is more of a territorial concept rather than an ideological concept, cultural concept, or something which has a history, which something which has some kind of civilizational ethos, which words like Hind or word like India signified in earlier times. So South Asia is the term. And it also has not become part of our consciousness as such. If you ask an ordinary person on the street the meaning of the word Hind, the meaning of the word India, or Indian Ocean, or Indian subcontinent, then probably they are able to say something. If you ask about the meaning of this term South Asia, then probably it appears more as a kind of dry, barren concept which has no history as such. So here we are talking about this term, and on this basis we can say that it is more of a modern term, a term which came into existence after the Second World War, which became current maybe in 1980s, and now it is becoming popular, especially in literary and cultural spaces, South Asia. And hence, when you have words like South Asian literature, South Asian films, or South Asian literary forms, or South Asian literary cultures, then you are talking about a kind of entity which shares some kind of commonalities. But on the other hand, you also have the demand of the nation state, which talks about India, which talks about Pakistan, which talks about Bangladesh. And you see that these are two mutually opposed positions. Now we think about South Asia, and you know that South Asia actually also has many layers, many sediments of culture, of civilizations. And that is why, if one talks about even religion in South Asia, Buddhism in South Asia, or Islam in South Asia, or Hinduism in South Asia, one cannot talk about Hinduism in South Asia in the present times without talking about Islam, without talking about, say, Buddhism. Similarly, one cannot talk about, say, Islam without talking about Hinduism, without talking about its interaction with other religions. So that means that way South Asia has layers and layers, sediments and sediments of civilizational entities, culture. I hope we are clear about this. Now, if we see another dimension of this particular topic, we see that it is true that nation states have one very strict version of the culture of a particular place. but there are always slippages. There are always things which are happening, which are in a way outside the control of nation states. Many things. So if you see the role of cinema here, or if you see the role of many television serials, and especially now if you see those television serials which are made in Pakistan, which are made in Bangladesh, but those television serials are also available on YouTube and anyone can access them. Similarly, many Indian television serials or Indian films, they are also available on YouTube. So that means there one cannot control who watches them. So this means that there is also a kind of exchange of art objects. There is exchange of art forms. There is also the exchange of cultural artifacts through cinema, through television, through literature. And of course, there is also another angle to it, and that is through the role of many smugglers, antisocial elements. We have seen many of those Hindi films in 70s and 80s, where smugglers used to play a very important role. So that means when they smuggle one item and they bring that item to another place, and similarly when those items reach different places, smuggled items, that is also kind of exchange. And also, one very important exchange is the role of NGOs. And you know that many activists who are devoted to some causes, whether they are in India or they are in Pakistan or in other places, they sometimes also come together to make a common cause about something. So, here, many commonalities are stressed, many commonalities of culture also come into existence through many cultural forms, through literary forms, through television serials, through cinema. Most importantly, cinema, because cinema is the most important medium in all these cultural forms, and it has the most widespread reach. And of course, we can talk about smuggled items and we talk about the role of NGOs. So that way, the rigid definition that is advanced by a nation state, that in a way is challenged, or some gaps are made in their definition by many of these entities, especially cultural artifacts. So I hope you understood this point. Now let us move to one another aspect of this. If we take examples from literature, and if you see the writings of somebody like Iqbal or somebody like Rabindranath Tagore, you'll see that in their writings you'll have this idea of Indic civilization in a way. That means their views often refer to a particular civilization. So in some cases, you can quote some couplets of Iqbal, or you can also think about Rabindranath Tagore. So that means many ideas, many colonial ideas are challenged by them through their stance, which stresses the role of a civilization, a whole civilization. You can see this articulation in especially Tagore and Iqbal. If we talk about certain projects of writing literary history after 1947, and you know that these projects were undertaken in different countries. How to write a literary history? How to write a literary history? When literary history is undertaken after 1947, there are definitely some problem areas also there. And if you think about a country like India, which is a very important country in South Asia, then how to write literary history, because India is also a land of many languages. Many languages. India officially also recognizes many languages. And apart from those officially recognized languages, we also have many other languages and dialects. And all these languages and dialects have produced a literature of their own. And they have also produced a literature which goes back to ancient times. So, writing literary history of a country immediately becomes a fraught concept, a difficult project also. Now, one way out of this was that it was stressed that there is essential unity of India's thought. There is essential unity of India's thought and literary background. So one can talk about that essential unity of India's thought and literary background. Consequently, when Sahit Academy, uh, it was the first to benefit from print culture. And similarly, when Ghalib was writing, Ghalib realized the importance of print culture before other poets, and he knew that if he could get print culture, just as now after the advent of digital culture, it has become even easier. So Ghalib realized the importance of print modernity, and so he paid utmost attention to his books being printed, his letters being printed, because at the same time when he was writing, many of his works were also being prescribed in schools and colleges. So he realized the importance of print culture. And one important reason, and this is a point which is made by Meher Afsha Faruqi in her book on Ghalib, one very important reason why Ghalib became an iconic figure at that time was also due to the reach of his works through print culture and his work being prescribed in colleges and schools. Roland Barthes has said, what gets taught is literature. What gets taught is literature. And so his works were taught, his letters were taught. So this means this distinction between orality and manuscript culture, and especially the important role that oral culture has played in South Asia. We still see the remnant of that oral culture when you see mushairas. Mushairas. What is a mushaira? You have poetry being performed, poetry being recited, poetry which have people don't need, in fact, paper to recite their poetry. There is another very important form, in fact, is which became very popular, especially in the Indian subcontinent in South Asia, and that is what you call dastan. Now, there was a time when you had many of those dastan goes. They used to narrate a dastan. They used to act that dastan. And in fact, the text of the dastan was not written. And there, the relationship between a dastan go, the narrator of that tale, and the audience was also very, very organic, very, very close relationship. So the text of the dastan was not written. It is only later that the text of dastan have been written. One is familiar with the Dastan Amir Hamza. And in fact, today we don't even know the names of many Dastan goes. So that means there were many important Dastan goes and we don't even know their names. Why? Because it was an oral form, and it is only later. You are from Lucknow, and the Naval Kishore Press, in fact, brought out many of those dastans. And Shamsurban Faruqi has done a lot of work in the area of dastan goi. So this means that this balance between orality and manuscript culture is a very important aspect of South Asian literature. And these two traditions, the tradition of orality and the tradition of manuscript culture, are very important, very strong in South Asian literature. Now, there is one very important factor also about this. Since there are many languages in South Asia, many languages, and if we talk about India, then there are many languages in India also. And one very important issue is, or rather, one misconception is the view of a language as being stable and individual. That means you have a language which is stable, which has not changed, which has been there for many centuries. Actually, this is not true. And languages have borrowed from each other, languages have learned from each other, and languages have died down also. Languages have flourished and they have disappeared. In 19th century, or in the even in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, it was very common in mushairas to hear Persian poetry. Persian poetry. And there was a time when Persian poetry was the dominant form in mushairas. But now one does not hear any Persian poetry in mushairas in India. Similarly, when one think about this relationship between languages, one can talk about Urdu and one can talk about Hindi. And here also a lot of work has been done which talks about the development of Urdu right from its beginning, where it was Hindi or Hindvi or Gujri, and of course Rekhta and so on. So that means if we talk about Hindi in today's context, then today's Hindi actually did not exist even at the beginning of the 19th century. Rather, it was the elevation of Khadi Boli in later years. So that means this also is an important issue in South Indian languages, that although there are there is literature, and literature may be one expressed in different languages, but a language does not appear as stable or individual if we trace the history of a language. And especially this point can be stressed by looking at the relationship of Hindi and Urdu. And of course, this question can also become a fraught question and political question, how this is approached. And I have been saying it again and again, there are the demands of nation state on the one hand, and of course, the intercultural communication on the other. Now, if we talk further, and here we can talk about many important programs, especially in American universities, where today South Asian literature is taught. I must say there are not many universities, but there are still universities, many, where South Asian literature is taught. So what is included in South Asian literature? Naturally, if there is a paper on South Asian literature, one paper, if you talk about one paper, then it will include Indian writers, it will include Pakistani writers, it will include Bangladeshi writers, and it may include writers from other parts of the subcontinent. So, for example, a Nepali writer or a writer from Bangladesh and so on. And literature produced by Indian diaspora or literature produced by Pakistani or Nepali diaspora, that also in fact qualifies as South Asian literature. So in many South Asian literature courses, you have all these authors in one place. But since the individual history of a country is also a fraught issue, so how this author is approached or taught, that becomes an issue. Let me give you one interesting example. And that interesting example is, if you think about today's Pakistan, and there are also demands of nation state in writing Pakistani history. Pakistani history maybe would focus on Muslim rule, Mughal rule, or for that matter, Sultanate period. But if you think about a very important place like Mohenjo-daro, that is, or what you call Indus Valley civilization, which India in fact prides on, then Indus Valley civilization, many of those sites are in Pakistan. So, what stops Pakistan from tracing its cultural roots to Indus Valley civilization? To Indus Valley civilization, it is the project of the nation state. That means Delhi is in India, Agra is in India, but probably in cultural terms, in terms of medieval history, maybe Delhi is more important for the nationalist project in Pakistan. And Mohenjo-daro or many sites of Indus Valley civilization are less important, although geographically many of those sites are there. So this is one issue. But if we talk about the role of novelists, role of writers, then they can probably transcend that barrier. Maha Khan Phillips, one important Pakistani writer, wrote a novel, The Curse of Mohenjo-daro. The Curse of Mohenjo-daro. And this novel is a kind of historical thriller. The story is set in Mohenjo-daro, and equally there are some characters which exist in the modern times. But Maha Khan Phillips was ready to trace that part, that history of Pakistan, which the nation state or demands of nation state would not highlight. Similarly, when you see many of those television serials or films, there also you can come across many of those movements where there is a departure from the nationalist project. Finally, I'll just say that if we think about South Asian literature and if we think about many of those forces that have produced knowledge about South Asia, many important forces which have produced knowledge about South Asia, then these forces will include colonialism, capitalism, and Christianity. And here one can talk about the work of translators in 19th century, many of those Orientalists, their contribution, their work, many of them were serving the cause of British colonialism. Many of them were serving the cause of Christianity, but they did produce some knowledge about India. So 200 years of British rule in the Indian subcontinent produced knowledge about India. And here three forces which are responsible for that knowledge: colonialism, capitalism, and Christianity. And of course, after independence, when you can see a process of decolonization started, we are trying to look at that knowledge critically. And one result of that knowledge is also one result of our critical view of this knowledge is also the existence or our focus on South Asian literature, we are where we are talking Indian writers, Pakistani writers, or in other words, writers from the Indian subcontinent. In other words, writers from South Asia. And in many English departments in the country, canon or English canon is gradually giving way to writers which are homegrown, writers who come from different Indian languages, or writers who come from languages current in South Asia. And South Asian literature, as such, in many English departments, is a result of this process of decolonization. Of course, there are many more important issues, but I think I should stop here at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, there has been some internet connectivity problem at our end. So I got disconnected for a while, and now I'm sitting in the computer lab. So thank you so much, sir, for this very informative and insightful lecture on South Asian literature. And I think our students, as well as our teachers, and every one of us have hugely benefited from your lecture. And you have very, I think, in great detail gone into the right from the term itself, that how it is carrying the baggage of the ideological baggage, and how like South Asian literature, this term itself, the South Asia word, is a neutral term. It is more acceptable, and how it is devoid of any cultural signification, and how colonialism and capitalism, and, as you said, Christianity, have played an important role in producing this knowledge about South Asia. But we need to look at it in more critically to this whole field. So now I would request my colleague, Dr. Shah Mohammad Faiz, to take up the question answer session.
Very correctly said, Dr. Huma Yaqub. It was indeed a very wonderful lecture, and enlightening and an engaging talk by Professor Asim Siddiqui. And we really lost track of time, the way he presented things in such a beautiful manner, and made so very complex things so very easy. Most of us have been reading about South Asian literature, but sir, your talk has made it come all alive for us, if I can put it that way. Apart from the Google platform, we have many viewers on the YouTube channel as well. And I'll take up a few questions. We have a question from one of our scholars. He says, how is South Asian literature different from Asian literature? Like, is there a difference, or can the two terms be interchanged?
You see, if we think about this question in terms of geography, then Asian literature actually, because Asia is a bigger entity. So South Asia is a kind of regional grouping, regional grouping. Now, if you think about Southeast Asia, then it will signify a very different entity. Similarly, if you let us think about different directions: North Asia, South Asia, West Asia, East Asia. Now, West Asia, West Asia refers to Middle Eastern countries, Middle Eastern countries. And similarly, East Asia, it's of course countries like Japan, China, so on. And South Asia here refers to a particular regional entity, a particular regional grouping. So Asian literature actually would mean, or should include literature produced in the Middle East, literature produced in China, Japan, and that's why South Asia is more specific. Similarly, if you go to the United States, if you hear words like South Asian literature, then it refers to literature produced in the Indian subcontinent. Asian literature becomes too vast an entity. Although the word European literature is used, European literature, and Europe or continental literature. Of course, continental refers to literature produced in Germany, France, Russia, so something which is different from English literature. But Asian literature as a term has not gained any currency as such.
Okay, thank you so much. Then we have another question from a scholar, Rajiv. He says that can we call South Asian literature in the post-colonial era as a quest for identity? Like, how far is it a quest for identity?
Very much, very apt observation. It is a quest for identity also. But actually, what identity? And as I pointed out numerous times in this talk, on the one hand, there is the demand of the nation state or nationalist project, where if you talk about Indian identity, then Indian identity must be sought maybe in opposition to Pakistani identity or Bangladeshi identity or Chinese identity and so on. But when we talk as students of literature, then things are not so clear cut. Things are not clear cut. And you can see influences, you can see resonance, you can see echoes, and you can see a work being set in one place talking about different people. So search for identity certainly, and search for maybe a kind of some kind of civilizational ethos. That is true. And search for different literary forms also.
Very rightly said, sir. Then on the YouTube platform, we have one of our viewers who says, has translation of these South Asian literature, literary pieces, has translation been able to really help the South Asian literature in true sense? Or do you feel to some extent it has been responsible for a kind of misrepresentation?
I would not say misrepresentation, because translation is the need also. How else would we read literature in a language that we do not know except through translations? So translation actually has played a very important role in bridging the gap actually. So when I read, for example, Bengali literature, I don't know Bengali, but when I read Rabindranath Tagore, when I read his novel, for example, Home and the World, then I realize, oh, I can relate to many things in the novel. If I did not know Bengali, I would not be able to read even a very important writer like Rabindranath Tagore, right? Similarly, there are definitely commonalities between Premchand and many of those writers who are writing in Urdu, but they are writing in Pakistan. So if one does not know Urdu, the text will reach only through translation. So translation is a must. Translation, in fact, has bridged the gap. Translation has opened, uh, say, lots of opportunities also. So translation is a must. It has, I would not say it has misrepresented, but rather translation is a great necessity, and it has brought different subcultures together.
Clearly, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Huma.
Yes, Sir has very patiently and I think very elaborately answered all the queries and questions. So now I invite our in charge, Dr. Abdul Quddus, to say a few words.
Assalamu alaikum. Uh, Good afternoon, everybody, especially Professor Asim sir. After speaking, Professor Asim sir, nothing to share. It's a very wonderful lecture delivered by Professor Asim sir. Basically, I believe that English literature is the ocean. It has many dimensions, many aspects, like many areas, many branches. Uh, Normally, other languages do not have in their literary syllabus and literature. American literature, European literature, English literature in translation, the literature, South Asian English literature in South Asia. All these dimensions are there. And sir, in his brief lecture, explain all these dimensions and commonalities, things, important features which are common in the South Asian countries, and also at the same time differences among the different entities, different cultural entities. Very beautifully explained everything. Thank you for this enlightening lecture, sir. But in fact, I am not in a position to comment or say anything after this enlightening and wonderful lecture by you, sir. Basically, our one thing I can share, that our Lucknow campus of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, as you told earlier, many faces are known to me. Basically, it is extension of Aligarh Muslim University. Large number of assistant professors are there here in our campus. and they are very dedicated and very hardworking and sincere to the subject, to the development of the institution. Really, credit somehow goes to our parent institute, Aligarh Muslim University. Thank you, sir, and thank you, AMU. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for those encouraging words. Now I request Dr. Muhammad Wahid Khan to deliver a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Huma Yaqub, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are very much.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Muhammad Asim Siddiqui, sir. Renowned poet and translator, Professor Anisul Rahman, sir. Respected in charge, Manu Lucknow campus, Dr. Abdul Qudus, sir. My supervisor and mentor, Professor Samina Khan, ma'am. My teacher, Professor Aisha Munira Rashid, ma'am. And faculties of other universities, dignitaries, dedicated faculties, member here, colleagues, scholars, dear students and friends. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you. I am overwhelmed by an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks in Galaxy of Scholar on the occasion of this extension lecture on Growing South Asian Literature Definition, Scope, Challenges. I avail this opportunity on behalf of Manu Lucknow campus to express my sincere and deepest gratitude to our keynote speaker, Professor Muhammad Asim Siddiqui, Chairperson, Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh, for joining us online today. Respected sir, we owe you a debt of gratitude for your comprehensive, nuanced, insightful, inspirational, and informative lecture. Sir, we have greatly benefited from your profound knowledge and experience. We are fortunate enough to listen to you and imbibe your ideas and suggestions on this intellectual deliberation. Thank you, sir, for giving us your precious time and familiarizing us with this topic. It was a real pleasure to listen to you, sir. Thank you. I am especially indebted to our respected in charge Manu Lucknow campus, Dr. Abdul Qudus, sir, for his continuous support in organizing this extension lecture. He has helped us in making this lecture a grand success. Thank you, sir, for your help and support. I owe special gratitude to coordinator of this program, Dr. Huma Yaqub ma'am, and convener, Dr. Asim sir, who had been giving advice and gave a hue to this program. I owe a special gratitude to my mentor and supervisor, Professor Samina Khan, and my respected teacher, Professor Aisha Munira Rashid ma'am, who gave their valuable time and joined us online. I would also like to place on record my gratitude to the organizing committee member, Dr. Bushra Tazim, for her wholehearted support to make this program successful. This vote of thanks will remain incomplete without thanking Mr. Abdul Rahman for his technical support. I further thank to all my colleagues for their unconditional support and for always being there. Apart from our team members and faculty members, I also acknowledge my indebtedness to our non-teaching staff for their active support. Without their help, it was not possible for us to execute this program successfully. I want to extend my sincere thanks to faculties and scholars of other universities who joined us through Google Meet and YouTube channel. Last but not least, my heart is full of thanks to my dear students who attended this program through online mode. Thanks you and thanks a lot. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Like it was indeed as if I'm getting nostalgic, reliving those moments when I had attended your classes. So it was wonderful to host you, if I can say that. So I think this was a wonderful session, and thank you everyone who has joined us.
One thing, if
Yes.
you don't mind, two supervisors are there in the screen. I observe. So if I would like to listen a few words from them also, Aisha ma'am and Samina ma'am.
Okay, I would request
You can request
Aisha.
on our behalf. because we
Yes,
heard a lot of
I would request Professor Aisha to please,
few
if
words
she can unmute
for
herself
our
and
encouragement.
say a few words.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much for sharing the link with me. I received the link from you and Dr. Huma and from Dr. Bushra Tazeen also. She's the one who has worked
Okay.
under my supervision. It's always a pleasure and an honor. In fact, very beneficial to listen to Professor Asim Siddiqui. I mean, he makes all the ideas so clear, and I feel that I can go to my class with a new, refreshed enthusiasm. It becomes so clear, all the ideas. I always read, try to read a lot, but I'm never so clear unless and until I've listened to him. So thanks a lot. And thank you so much. And it's so nice to see Dr. Wahid here. He has been our student, or I've met new people also. And I really wish that I could be amongst you right now. I could be in Lucknow and meet you all. But perhaps that would have been more time consuming traveling and coming there. And right now, sitting at home, I'm able to connect with all of you. It's my pleasure, it's my honor, and it's thank you very much for acknowledging me twice, Wahid. And Bushra, thanks for sharing the link with me. Humapa,
Thanks
we'll
a lot,
meet.
Thank
Professor.
you, ma'am, and
Yeah,
welcome.
Yes, definitely.
we'll
Thanks a
meet,
lot for
definitely.
sharing your ideas on this platform. Now, I would request Professor Samina Appa to just please share her ideas and say a few words for our encouragement. Samina Appa, are you there?
Ma'am, probably she left the meeting, I think.
Okay,
I
that's
am
okay.
calling her. Just give me a few
Okay,
seconds. I am calling her.
okay. I think I would request the other participants to please, if they can, switch on their videos and we can take a picture together. So, Abdurrahman Sabi hai. Okay, kya ho gaya?
आसिम भाई अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
हाँ सर.
फुल स्क्रीन हो गया ये
Okay. यही मैं कर दूँ.
फंक्शन और प्रिंट स्क्रीन
Print screen किधर है?
Have you taken a picture, Uma?
Yes.
I'll take
I have.
I'll take
Thanks a
your
lot,
leave.
sir.
Yeah, I have to
Thanks a
join.
lot, sir.
Yeah, I have to join another actually lecture.
Yes, I can understand that, sir. You must be very busy.
And
So
and
thanks a lot once again
and actually
for your
and
wonderful
actually
lecture.
and actually I did not share details or link of this lecture in my department because there is another program going on. I didn't want to take the audience
Overlap.
away from that program. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
अस्सलाम
Assalamu
वालेकुम।
Thank you.
All the organizers, you're doing a wonderful job. Whenever there's a lecture, you can keep sharing. Whenever I have time, I'll
Definitely, I
definitely
will.
join.
Definitely.
Thank you so
Definitely.
much, ma'am, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bushra.
Actually, the internet connectivity has gone on the third floor, so we both are sitting